And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Bud Elliott. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. I'm Chip Patterson, hitting you here on a Wednesday where, yes, as promised, we are going to your mailbag questions. How do you get a question in the big old bag of mail? You go and you leave us a 5-star review, and in that review, put your question. We'll add it to the bag, and we will pull out some of our favorites every Wednesday from now until the end of the regular season. And of course, we always love interacting with our fans during the off season as well. Thanks to all of you that have already listened to our instant reaction to the college football playoff rankings release. We had a lot of people in the chat, a lot of people watching live at youtube.com/cover3. That will continue, the reacting to the new rankings every single week. So put that on your radar as we add yet another episode to this non-stop stream of multi-platform excellence. Couple headlines, a fun activity before we dive into the big old bag of mail. I was overjoyed, gentlemen, when somebody hit us up on Twitter and asked for why the sirens were not in their feed. Why was there not an emergency podcast for the news that Clay Helton is going to be taking over as Georgia Southern's next head coach? Clay Helton obviously carries some cachet as a name, but also I think that the same way that we gave Georgia Southern some love after the decision was made, identifying it as a program where they care very deeply about college football. It's sort of a unique community around that program and that university. Now Clay Helton comes all the way from fired at USC to taking over at Georgia Southern. I felt like Georgia Southern, they deserve it. I wanted to hear what we were thinking about Clay Helton and taking over. The timetable is a little bit interesting. We can get into that. I don't know if that stands out to you, but what do we think about Helton to Georgia Southern?
You guys were right. Like you guys have always said, Clay Helton can't coach. I think if you're a USC fan who wanted him out, you're like, see? Because I do think it's a reflection of the market for Clay Helton. I was more surprised by anything that he didn't wait a little bit longer to see where some of these dominoes fall, because there's going to be some good openings where I think would be, and this is not an insult to Georgia Southern, but teams that are perceived as better as Georgia Southern. If Sonny Dykes leaves SMU, that opens. If Luke Fickell leaves Cincinnati, that's open. Like there are going to be some openings of some premier Group of Five teams that I was a little bit surprised that Clay Helton didn't wait around for. But maybe this is a realistic assessment of what he actually is as a coach.
I mean, if you're Georgia Southern, are you making this just because he's a name that people will know? His track record at USC was terrible. That if you read the Feldman takedown of that program, I mean, total lack of physicality, like certain guys on the staff were allowed not to recruit. Our USC site has had a lot of the same things. And I like Clay Helton as a person a ton. I've interviewed him one-on-one. He is like one of the most I'd love to have a beer with him, very just regular dudes. He's not one of these like coaching weirdos. He doesn't just coach speak you the entire time and just nothing but cliches, but the results are poor, man. And I don't know. I think Georgia Southern could have done better, but I'm also smart enough to realize that all these coaching grades we do are total crapshoots, right? We don't actually know what's going to work. He has head coaching experience, which I'm guessing the AD there values. I don't think he'll run the triple. And he's been in the big program, albeit one that has resources compared to Georgia Southern, which does not. It's a big shoulder shrug for me. Okay, do what you want.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar reaction where it's like when I saw the news break yesterday, I was just kind of like, all right, that's a surprise. I have no idea if that's going to work or not. I do think there's definitely kind of an aspect of, well, we recognize that name and he's the USC coach. So that shouldn't be too difficult to sell. Look at us. We're selling the former USC coach. But like my problem with Clay Helton at USC was we've talked about, like you mentioned just now, about the physicality and the way that they played, but like Clay Helton to me has always struck me as a program builder, a culture builder, the guy who's going to, get our kind of guys. And it was just like, to me, that seemed like a wasted place to have him at USC, which is a school where you could just go get talent and win national titles. You don't need to be bringing in our kind of guys. So I thought that a good landing spot for Helton would be a smaller school, maybe not, G5, P5, whatever, but somebody that has to rely on development and recruiting and just, getting old and staying old. But I don't know if Georgia Southern is really that kind of program, because we've seen there hasn't been a whole lot of patience with their coaches there lately. You know what I mean? Like they have high expectations. They want to be winning the Sun Belt. They want to be competing for Sun Belt titles. They want to be competing for maybe that New Year's Six berth as the Sun Belt expands and is probably going to be becoming more powerful in the Group of Five landscape in these coming years. And I don't know if Clay Helton is that guy. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. But I do agree. I don't see him running the triple, which is something that I feel like has been important in that community and in that fan base for a while, just with the identity of the program. So to me, it just doesn't it doesn't really feel like a fit.
I disagree. This was a huge reminder that Clay Helton's not a West Coast guy. Like
No,
he played at Auburn. He played at Houston. He spent a decade at Memphis
Born in Gainesville.
Like Memphis teams that went in the 10 years or so that he was an assistant there. I think they went to 4 or 5 bowl games. I woke up to that. It took me like, oh, wait a second. Like USC was really the, take him out of his comfort zone in terms of the larger aspect of his, growing up, playing career and coaching career elsewhere. And now I think that he's returning home. I think about his brother who is having success at Western Kentucky, and that for him, if he was probably telling his agent, like I would like to get a job maybe back in the South. I would like to get a job that's a little bit closer to where the rest of my coaching career had been. And so I had to wake myself up and be like, oh, wow, maybe this is a great opportunity for him to be a little bit more comfortable, to tap into whatever kind of connections he still might have there and restart things. Now, on the triple, it has been reported that Clay Helton was not the number one choice, that the number one choice was to float it out there to former Georgia Southern head coach, currently retired, killing it on the golf course, Paul Johnson, in which case I imagine that is going all in on the triple to bring in Paul Johnson, because why would you hire Paul Johnson if you're not going to do the triple option? But Clay Helton, he could still run the triple depending on the hire of his staff. I like for Clay Helton's potential success that he gets to hang around the program, work on building his staff, work on getting to know some of the players. And, for all of the nice guy reasons, you come around and be like, hey, you know what? Maybe this is going to be a little bit of a better environment for Helton to be able to have some success and be able to have sort of get things going in a different direction for his head coaching career.
Jimmy Sexton's amazing, by the way. Also, USC
is he Jimmy Sexton guy?
I believe so. That's what I saw on Twitter. Could be wrong. USC did recruit Georgia in the Southeast fairly well. For all the criticism that Helton got for letting guys leave the West Coast, which was deserved. If you have the USC job, you need to lock that down, and basically you have right of first refusal on all those kids west of the Rockies, or you should, if you don't screw it up. And he did screw it up. They did a pretty good job recruiting Florida and Georgia and some places like that. So he's not going to be a new name to these high school coaches in that region.
That's good. Well, all right. So Clay Helton, Georgia Southern, is that someone that you could pick the Eagles competing for a spot in the Sun Belt Championship game? So compete in contention for a division title, let's say into November, in 3 years. Do you see it?
Sure. I mean, if Napier leaves Louisiana, there's no reason that they're going to stay great. App is the more established, but App was an FCS power. So is Georgia Southern. I think Georgia Southern could do something similar. Coastal is certainly on the come up. Georgia State is still theoretical. Everybody always talks about how good they can be. Troy hasn't been dominant in a long time. Who am I missing here? ULM's not going to bounce back quickly.
Is Coastal going to be able to continue to be successful after Jamie Chadwell?
Because after Grayson McCall too.
Sure.
Yeah. Sure. They could, in 3 years, they could be there probably.
Yeah. It'll also depend on what they do with their offense. If they're going to keep running, if they're going to transition off the triple into more of what they were running at USC, or just more, a quote unquote normal offense, the personnel on Georgia Southern right now is not built for that. So it's going to take some time. Although with the transfer portal, who knows?
There you go, Georgia Southern. We gave you a nice little chunk when the job was open, and now we've got Clay Helton arriving. Best of luck to Helton in that program. And the Sun Belt in this huge conference realignment has decided we don't care about airports. We want communities, and that has made me, just as a college football fan, a little bit more partial and interested in the Sun Belt moving forward. All right, Tom, you pitched hot or not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna let you introduce the segment to the audience out here, but I love where we're at, and I'm excited to see where this goes.
Okay, so for those of you who have been on the internet since the very early days, you might remember a website way back in the dark ages of the internet called Hot or Not. If you don't, here's the premise. It was basically a rating site in which brave souls would post photos of themselves online. And this is back in the early 2000s. So just to put one photo online, you needed to take a week off of work to upload that thing onto your computer. But you'd post a photo of yourself and put it out there on the internet anonymously. And then everybody else would come to that site and they would rate whether you were hot or not. So therefore you really just got like a very good indication of whether you were attractive to the rest of the human population or not. And it could be sobering, it could be uplifting, depending on what the people thought. But so I'm bringing it back. By the way, I think the people who started that company are now the people behind Bumble, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyways,
I was gonna say, this sounds like Tinder, but not for dating.
Yeah, it's exactly what it was. It was the same thing, except you couldn't just swipe right and say let's go.
Right. Yeah.
I'll meet you there
Tom,
at 3 a.m.
Tom, were you hot or not?
Yeah.
7.2.
Hey,
Solid.
It won't surprise you, but I did find a loophole in Tinder for my brother-in-law. Like, I wasn't on Tinder because I'm married, but my brother-in-law is single, and I was like, Jordan, here's the deal. You get back when you had unlimited swipes, like, bro, just swipe the hell out of this thing and then figure out who matches with you and then sort it out later. Like say yes to everybody. And then you only care if they say yes back. Like, why are you wasting your time deciding to swipe or not? Like this is an inefficient process. You're trying to figure out whether to swipe or not. They may not swipe back on you. So swipe yes on everybody and then just go through your matches. That's a much more time efficient process. It's like, oh, good call.
Yeah, Bud's got arbitrage for the dating sites, multiple screens. Let's see where.
Well, we were trying to go play golf, and he's wasting his time. I'm like, dude, give me this. Let's go.
All right, Tom.
He can't judge him without getting another personality first. So, anyways, hot or not, this edition is basically I'm going to propose a take. I'm not saying I agree with the take. I'm not saying I disagree with the take. I'm just proposing the take, and then you guys are going to debate whether it's a hot take or not. Hot or not. So the first one, this is based off of some stuff that I've seen about, we touched on a little bit before the show, Dan Mullen. I have seen Florida fans on message boards and on Twitter in my mentions talking about how Florida needs to fire Dan Mullen and get Lane Kiffin. Hot or not, Lane Kiffin is not an upgrade on Dan Mullen.
I think that's a hot take for the Florida job. But I also do not think that Florida would hire Lane Kiffin.
Hot. That's a hot take. Lane Kiffin as an upgrade over Dan Mullen. I just, if things were going as poorly for Florida with Lane Kiffin in there, the comments would be funnier to us, but they would not be funnier to Florida fans as he was explaining the struggles.
Danny?
I think it's closer to lukewarm, but I'll still say it's hot. Man, it'd be great if it happened. Oh my gosh, it'd be so much fun. Oh man. But I think it's hot. I think it's too hot.
I will point out that as a Power 5 coach, Lane Kiffin is 46-28 in his conference. In the SEC, he's 11-11 so far, including his time at USC. He is 28-23 in conference play. What has Lane Kiffin really accomplished compared to Dan Mullen?
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, it's a hot take. I don't think Lane Kiffin is an upgrade over Dan Mullen. They both bring the similar offensive leaning. We look at you as a game planner and as a play caller. I guess
he's a much better recruiter.
Yeah. Wait, no, I want to change my answer there. I thought Tom was saying he's not an upgrade, and I said that was hot. I think he is an upgrade.
No. I said he's not an upgrade. Yeah, that's the take. Lane
Yeah,
Kiffin is
okay.
not an upgrade. So if you disagree, it's a hot take. If you agree, it's not. But no, I just don't think it's. I think the biggest difference. I think if you're a Florida fan right now, if you're getting Lane Kiffin, it's just for the recruiting. Because I think offensively they're both very good, but I also think that both coaches throughout their career. I mean, as offensive coordinators, do we count the Alabama's national title? Lane was the offensive coordinator, right? Even if he wasn't coaching. But they both won national titles as offensive coordinators, but as head coaches, they've seemed to hit a ceiling.
Can we just say something real quick about Dan Mullen, what he should say about all this recruiting stuff? He should say, just let us buy players like Georgia does. And I know they can't go against each other, but in the new era of NIL, why aren't you going to people and saying, hey, we need to pay more. We need to do whatever it takes. I mean, Georgia was one of the first people that had several players that had already signed up deals that had not put on a uniform yet. And Quinn Ewers goes to Ohio State. It's about recruiting. If I'm Dan Mullen, I'm saying, let's go. You want me to recruit? Give me the resources to do it. Let's figure out a way. And I guarantee you, Florida boosters, fans, they would do it, whatever he asked for. They need to create that so you can go toe-to-toe with Georgia in recruiting.
All right, so if the money's equal, then the personalities begin to matter again.
In which case, you'd rather have Lane than Dan Mullen.
Yeah, because one's not a weirdo.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Lane is weird.
Lane's weird, but
weird.
Lane's kind of just like your goofy little brother weird. Whereas, yeah.
By the way, Lane Kiffin, the headset toss, my favorite note from that is that he got on the actual headset and told Jeff Lebby, I might have just made a big joke of myself. We better score some points. And then they laid a goose egg in the first half.
Yeah.
Right.
I just like his oh no, what did I just do? Moment of self-reflection.
So the temperature there leans towards hot from all three of you. Got it. Here's one. The next take. Cincinnati is a better coaching job in the American Athletic Conference than it will be in the Big 12.
Disagree. That is a hot take. That is definitely a hot take. The Big 12 opens up pipelines, and I think that while Cincinnati, there's nothing stopping Cincinnati from going south. I think that is so much better than having to go and fight with Big 10 schools for some of those like Pennsylvania and Eastern Seaboard schools. So for recruiting purposes, I think that the Big 12, is a better job. I think that's a hot take.
Question here. Are we talking about then it will be in the new American or the American as it stands right now?
Just right. If it stayed in the American, it would be a better job than it would be in the Big 12.
Yeah, I think that's hot because of who just left the American. But I think there are certainly challenges. You're going to play a tougher schedule in the new Big 12 than you did in the AAC. You're going to have you're not going to get East Carolina and Tulane and teams like that. Not as consistently. You get Kansas. That's which is worse.
I think it would depend too on the playoff scenario, what it looks like. If we go expansion and you get a little bit easier access, you're staying at a weaker spot, then I think it would matter. But as it stands now, no.
I mostly agree with you guys, although I do think that Cincinnati joining the Big 12 will cause Luke Fickell to leave. I think it's just going to hasten the process of Luke Fickell leaving for a Big 10 job.
Because it'll be harder to win 10 games every year, and your
star
won't be as bright.
Yeah, because his recruiting and everything he knows is in the Midwest. So now all of a sudden, if he's got to go be getting in Texas and in that Florida, it's and not that he can't. It's just his bread and butter is Ohio, and I just think that he'd be more interested in coaching a Big 10 school at that point than coaching Cincinnati in the Big 12. But again, that's all speculation on my part. There's no information there behind it.
Before you move on, when I set my ceiling for Cincinnati, I remember that in the Big East, they were winning against teams that are now ACC teams. So that the idea being that if you can go 12-0, if you can go 11-1 and win conference championships against, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and West Virginia or Big 12 teams too, then you should be able to still do it also in the Big 12, which quality-wise makes up a lot of teams that are on that same level as the old Big East.
Yeah, but ask West Virginia about that, right? And how well they've done in the Big 12. Ask Ask Rutgers about how bringing Greg Schiano back has worked. Like, they're super happy about it, but like Schiano's best work there was when the Big East was super, super weak. When they joined the P5 league, they're not competitive in any way.
They did just beat Illinois. That's a pretty big win, bud.
That's fair. Got the P5 pelts.
This one's kind of along the same line of thinking, but UCF does more for the Big 12 by joining it than the Big 12 will do for UCF.
I don't think
that's hot.
Too hot. You do?
Yeah, for this reason. Because if you didn't join, you're going to be stuck in the AAC.
But you could be dominating the AAC as the power. You could. No, I don't want to influence the results. Danny, you say it's not.
No, because I think UCF does a ton now, but the package deal, the fact you're getting 4 does kind of dilute it somewhat, but I think UCF's in a pretty good spot. Their brand is pretty recognizable. They've already claimed the 2017 national championship. Like, I don't think they needed the Big 12 as much as the Big 12 needed UCF.
So that would be not a hot take. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's not a hot take.
Yeah, I lean more towards the not myself. I just think that UCF, if it stayed in the American, and I think this is honestly, I mean, I've brought this up in the past on the show too. I think that saving the Big 12, I feel like you're going to the name, which the brand, obviously, which is huge these days. But if UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston had stayed in the American, and the American was able to expand and grab another couple teams, I don't think it'd be crazy to think that the American would be a better conference in the Big 12, in the not too distant future after Oklahoma and Texas leave the Big 12. So I think both of them, like UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, I think all of them joining the Big 12 probably does more for the Big 12 than it does for those programs right now. Finally, this one, some people will be bothered by this, because this is jobs in life, but just let Conference USA die.
Not a hot take.
Not hot.
At least there is a life cycle here. We have examples of conferences that have dissolved and then they can be brought back and their members can land in different places. And we're down to 4 schools, right?
3.
Yeah. I think that is what we're expecting to see here. Just like the Big East and the WAC and the Southwest Conference and the Metro Conference. It is very sad for all of our memories of when the league intrigued us, but
hold on. I'm going to say that's hot because I like working. I like traveling to Fridays to New York City and having a nice job up there where I get to break down a lot of Conference USA games for CBS Sports Network. So I'm going to say fight to the finish. Let's keep it alive.
But here's my argument for it. And it's, again, I understand it's a conference, it's jobs, it's all that stuff. And there's right now, assuming Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee leave for the MAC, which seems to be the way things are going, there are 3 schools left that need a home. And I'm not sure there is a home for them. And they're in a really crappy situation, understanding all of that. But Conference USA was created in 1995. So it's not like it's a long held conference that's existed for a long time with a lot of history. It's been around for 25 years. And it was created after the SWC and all that stuff kind of disbanded and the Big 12 was formed. And there were a lot of schools that needed a place to go. So they got together and they formed a conference. But here are the teams that were initially in Conference USA when it opened in 95 and 96, because Houston joined a year later when football began. Cincinnati, American, going to the Big 12. DePaul, doesn't even play football, is in the Big East. Louisville, ACC. Marquette, no football, Big East. St. Louis, no football, Atlantic 10. South Florida, American. Charlotte, Conference USA, but leaving for the Sun Belt. Charlotte's leaving for the AAC. Southern Miss is leaving for the Sun Belt. UAB is leaving for the AAC. Memphis is in the AAC. Tulane is in the AAC. Houston is in the AAC and joining the Big 12. None of the original schools in that conference remain in that conference. So what are we fighting to save?
The staff at the Dallas office. Danny going on Fridays up to New York.
Danny, you can go up to New York on Friday and do MAC games too. You could do Mountain West games. You could do American Athletic Conference games.
We can do UConn games with the best of them.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like,
I mean, you're right.
Do we
to
really
say-
need to be bringing up more FCS programs just to keep Conference USA alive and further diluting the FBS pool?
No, Conference USA is probably going to go away.
I would like more teams in the FBS though, for betting purposes, right? FBS lines open up earlier, better data on them. Let's have 300 FBS teams. That's fine. More scholarships for everybody.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to introduce you into my world as soon as the season ends. And I want you to see 351 of them college basketball teams trying to keep up with all that. And it's, I enjoy our nice, tight little 130 or so. It makes it a lot easier to wrap my head around it. Coming up on the other side, we get into the big old bag of mail, including with the college football playoff rankings release, the ever-changing, ever-ongoing debate of best versus most deserving. If a Group of Five player were to win the Heisman this season, who would be our pick here at the midseason, and more next. All right, time to get into the big old bag of mail. A reminder, if you want to jump in on a future mailbag question, go and leave us a 5-star review. And in that review, go ahead and put your question. All right. This question is from Odesant. Great pod. I'm always here for Chip's energy and Tom's unders. Never change. Mailbag question. All of you talk frequently about where you rank certain teams and will regularly discuss ranking disparities between the polls. Could you all explain whether you think these rankings ought to be resume-based, for example, a ranking of which teams have the best performance to date, or projection-based, for example, a ranking of which teams you expect to have the best performance from here on out? I often see the debate around postseason participation framed as finding the 4 best versus finding the 4 most deserving. And I think that much of the controversy around rankings comes down to disagreements between fans over what these polls actually represent. It would be great to hear you all talk about your preferences, how you personally go about ranking when asked to do so. Thanks for all your hard work. Keep it up. Go Ducks.
Depends what I'm trying to accomplish.
Good answer.
It's like if a power rating or a predictive rating, I don't think can be the rankings that you use during a regular college football season, or else there truly is no point to playing the season. Because if your power ratings are accurate, yeah, you're changing them as the season goes along, but they're not changing that much. Like, you might knock a team down a spot or two, but I would tell you right now, in most Vegas power ratings, Penn State's still a top 15 team. Is Penn State deserve to be ranked in the top 15 right now? No. So I think that if the results of games are going to matter, your ranking cannot strictly be based predictive. I think it needs, ideally, you need to find a blend, but that's, again, so it depends. Like, there are power ratings for gambling purposes. I have my separate ratings that I do, which are just completely reactive, which I use for our CBS Sports 130 ballot in my bottom 25. And then there are the rankings I submit for the Super 16 poll, which are really just my opinion of which team I think is better / most deserving / whatever the hell I feel like using at the time.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question because, like Tom just did, there are a lot of ways you can take this, right? Resume rankings, if you want to use them to project forward, are probably going to get you killed, right? They're not that accurate. I never fully remove priors from prior seasons. Like, I still, in week 15, will bake in Alabama's previous 5-year history because it makes rankings more accurate. That's proven. It's still more predictive than not. But I do think for the health of the sport, some of the things that happened last night, and I can't be on the Tuesday night show, but some of the things that happened last night I don't think are great if we're going to have, let's use the committee, for instance. If the committee is going to pick the 4 best teams, clearly, like, the pick of Alabama matches up with what they've done in the past. Like, Bama has a lot of really dominant wins over teams that the committee feels is top 25, like Ole Miss, Mississippi State, etc. And it has a close loss to another team that the committee feels is top 25. And Miami beating Pitt over the weekend probably didn't hurt either. However, I don't know that always picking the 4 best teams is actually the best thing for this sport. I think if we're going to crown a champion of a given year, we need to basically crown the most deserving champion of that year. And I think we do need to punish losses somewhat, and we can certainly reward good wins. But if we're always picking the very best teams, more often than not, it's going to be those teams that were very dominant in most of their games and had one slip up. Like a lot of those teams that Danny played on at Florida State would be where Bama is right now. You know, they were clearly better than some of those teams that had a 0 in the loss column. So if we want to be more accurate, you go power ratings. Although I will argue, I think that the treatment they gave Cincinnati last night is not consistent with the treatment they gave Alabama. Like, that's the one problem I have. Like, okay, you guys want to go power ratings this early and you want to go, you know, best wins and kind of ignore the losses. All right. I don't know if Cincinnati 6 there makes a ton of sense, but I think if we want to keep the sport more interesting, we either need to go a little bit more, resume as opposed to power rating for the committee, or expand it or contract it. But I think the combination of 4 and power ratings is giving too much leeway for teams to drop games and still go win it all and just be the best team by the end of the season. While not, I think our Cover 3 fans realize, like, most of these teams, you know, Baylor gets hot and goes 12-0. They're not actually going to win the national title. But fans want to be lied to a little bit. Everybody wants to lie to themselves to believe their team has a shot to make it. And I think we need to keep that dream alive at least until you get to the dance, and then let Cinderella get her slipper smashed, or however that. Gosh, I probably should watch that movie if I'm going to use that reference. But you guys see what I'm saying? Like, we need to keep the dream alive. And the current combination that bothers me is the combination of picking the quote-unquote 4 best teams as opposed to the 4 most deserving. And I think if you went with the 12 best teams, you would scoop up a lot of the most deserving, or even the 8 would scoop up a lot of the quote most deserving. The combination of 4 plus power rating, which is kind of what they're doing. I know they basically use like game control, top 25 wins.
They've got FPI on that sheet. That's a power rating.
Yeah, that's true. But an FPI certainly informs the strength of record metric, which closely tracks what they do. Not perfectly. I just don't like the combo of 4 plus power ratings. I think it's kind of a dream killer.
I hate it all. It's all confusing. It's all like the question is a great question, but if you ask analysts around the country who chime in on this on major networks, they all have different answers of what they should value. And then, you know what else they'll throw in there as well? The eye test, you know, and you have some of these more ambiguous reasons for putting teams there. I default to a fault to resume. I think winning matters, so I give undefeated teams a lot of credit for doing that, even if their schedule hasn't been that great. Because you know what? It usually comes out in the wash at the end. Like, I don't think Wake Forest is going to run the table. So they'll lose, and guess what? I'll be wrong. But I don't care if I'm wrong, because I think you should have Wake Forest higher than most because they've run the table. And I get that it's a strong schedule, but they've won. And when the committee sits last night and Gary Barta says about Cincinnati, and he points out, you know, their wins against 2-6 teams and 1-5 teams and how they didn't dominate against Tulane or Navy. Well, apparently struggling against those teams is worse than losing to Stanford, which is what Oregon did. And Oregon also, by the way, struggled against Cal, and they were losing against Fresno State late in the game. Again, I get Fresno State's a good team, but it just becomes very confusing. And I just get to this point of exasperation. Like, what are we doing? It makes zero sense. And yet we keep going through it. And it's Bill Hancock gets up there and says, we have a contract in place. I think we're going to get to that place where we find a sweet spot and we expand and we can kind of end some of this charade. But like, could you imagine? I was just looking at the stats from last year of the NFL playoffs. Like, according to, you know, if you did power ratings last year, Green Bay was probably one of the better teams in the country in the NFL. And yet Tampa Bay went there, beat them. Could you imagine if you like threw them all back in there and said, well, if they played again, you know, resumes and all this stuff. Well, man, did you see Tampa Bay? They looked awful in that 138-3 loss. Like, could you, like, it makes no sense that we do this. And yet I guess it's the beautiful flaw of college football, which all this is supposed to be great. Like, it's good for us. We get to debate it. It's good for ESPN. They create a show around it and there's a lot of discussion and who's in. I guess it's fun, but I worry, much like Bud, because I feel more of it and maybe it's just because of the evolution of social media, people have voices that matter. But I hear more and more fans being like, it's just going to be Bama and it's just going to be Ohio State. So who cares? Like, I guess we'll just tune in and watch those. And I think it's damaging to the game.
And I think that's part of the reason why there will be some hesitancy with expansion to have automatic qualifiers. Because as stupid as it is, the debate
is awesome.
It drives a lot of the interest.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've learned a lot these last few years in this country, and it turns out that getting people angry is how you get their attention.
Well, like, even for like, I have believed that college football is a talking sport. We spend 12 months talking about a regular season that only has 12 games. And if we left everything up to analytics and made things easy to understand, then the conversations wouldn't go on for 12 months. And I think that the debates that rage go all the way back to shared national championships from the poll era. You know, who is your national champion from the 2004 season? Who is your national championship from 1990? Like, I think that is the built-in, as you pointed out, Danny, I think that's the built-in beautiful flaw. And I think that as expanding the playoff might help with fans not checking out, and it might help with hope trafficking in trying to get more, literally more eyeballs involved and thinking they can win a national championship. The idea that we're going to be arguing best versus most deserving is going to continue as long as we are playing this sport, just because we have so few data points and so many variables built into the structure of a 12-month calendar of college football.
Which is why I loved the 12-team proposal that was put forth, because it had a little bit of both. It had 6, highest ranking, conference champions who get that automatic berth. And then there's some debate about the rest. So you kind of get a combination of, all right, you can win your way in, but you can also impress with the eye test, which I think it keeps the debate going on the back end. It keeps the debate going on who should be 1 and 2, right? Because they were going to rank the top 6 and the top 2 seeds get buys. So there's still a lot of conversation and there's still a lot of controversy, but you don't screw over a lot of teams. That's what bothers me the most. Like, I felt really bad for UCF players in 2017. I feel bad for players at Cincinnati. Luke Fickell will be fine, right? He can get a raise. He can go somewhere else. He's already getting a boatload of money. There's a lot of players who play at Cincinnati who will never play in the NFL, don't transfer, but they believed. However, maybe they should have been listening to Cover 3 because they could have listened to Tom and maybe been dealt a dose of reality. But I do think they believed, man, we have Indiana, Notre Dame on the road. If we beat them, we went out, we can make it. We can be this team, and they don't have a chance. Like, that's the part in all of this that really bothers me.
I do think a blend is my personal approach, and I don't look at deserving until we get a bigger sample size. Like, I need to get 4 to 5 games in, maybe even all the way to the midseason, before I feel like resume's doing much more other than splitting ties between teams that I think are better, which is a combination of eye test and power rating. So early in the season, I'm going to be favoring teams that I think who would win tomorrow. And later in the season, when I'm filling out ballots, it is much more about stacking up all of the wins and losses on a sheet of paper and then using that as a primary sorting tool. It's just tough because the different opponents and the different schedules, is your schedule backloaded? Is it front loaded? I think that can be a little deceiving and lead to some pretty big swings throughout your own ballot at the beginning of the season.
Also, last thing on this, well, 2 things. Number one, if you'd like Cover 3 and you want to advertise on Cover 3, maybe you have a national or regional audience, we now have an email you can hit up show ads at 247sports.com. That's show ads at 247sports.com. And who better to advertise with us than maybe somebody who runs marketing for a company who actually listens to us. So yeah, that's how you get in contact. If you're interested, we're going to do millions of downloads this football season and already have. So pretty excited about that. If we had, I feel like you cannot unring the bell. I heard Tom on an episode the other day say like we should contract or expand. And I don't think you can unring the bell and contract. I don't think contraction would be the worst thing, but like it's definitely not going to happen now. I wonder if we had this type of 4-team playoff system for a long time, even stretching back into the 80s, is college football as popular now as it is? I think this current format actually could have driven some interest away if we had this back in like the 80s and 90s, because of some of the interesting results that we had that maybe gave people the false but lasting belief that their teams really had a shot.
Like, I mean, would that be like the Georgia Tech and Colorado winning the
Georgia
national
Tech,
championship?
Colorado, yeah. I mean, BYU.
Well, why is the NFL so popular if they've always had a definitive playoff without any debate whatsoever? I think it's a lot of it's gambling related in fantasy football, which are part of the lexicon now in college football too, and always have been just the same.
But every team, okay, the difference is this, Danny. Every team in the NFL has a reasonable basis for belief that their team could be good and actually win a title soon. Even if you're like a damn Jets fan and they don't ever win anything. Like, under the structure of the sport with the salary cap and the roster limits and the draft, which rewards the worst teams, gets the first pick, you kind of have that continuing belief. It's not a belief that should be false. If you're terrible forever, that's really just your own fault. It's not a resources issue for the most part. In college, about 118 of the 130 teams should not have a true belief that they can win it all. For the good of the sport, we need that number to be more about like 100 of the 130. Don't think so. I need those fans of like Baylor and TCU and Washington and Wisconsin and all those teams that are never going to win another title to actually think that they could if they had that special year. And I don't like that the format right now kind of steps on them a little bit. Like we need that belief to stay alive.
But that's my question though. Why
the NFL, everybody has equal resources and they earn their way into the playoff via divisional format.
I know, but
automatic bids. And
what we've said on here is that the controversy has made the sport popular. Like, that's my question: is why is the NFL so popular? It's never had controversy. Like,
every game is close deep into the fourth quarter,
right?
Like,
so
like all these games remain interesting. Yeah.
But that you would be happy to know that I think that is one of the primary selling points of the people who are trying to push this expansion forward, that they did a research. They said, okay, if we had this system in all of these other playoff years, we would have had 3 times or 4 times the number of schools entering November or entering mid-November with a real shot to be able to make it. And that's what we want to do, is we want to expand that number from 12 to like 30 or 40 fan bases that are sitting there in the last month of the season, the greatest month of the season. Like, November is where everything comes together. I mean, it's just a downhill sprint after you've been spending all this other time slowly building up to this point. Having increasing that number, doubling, maybe even tripling, I do think that would be healthy for the sport in terms of eyeballs and everything else that comes with it, including the dollars. For us too. Yay. All right, next question. This one comes from Aaron. I started listening in the off season and I'm still loving the mid-season shows, especially the locks, though I do wish they were actually locks. Just kidding. A Group of Five school getting a Heisman Trophy winner is probably as likely as Cincinnati making the playoffs. But if you were to consider just Group of Five schools, who would be up for the Heisman? Ritter. I mean,
yeah.
For starters.
I have a question.
Yes.
BYU. Do we consider BYU Group of Five? Okay,
yes.
Then I would recommend Tyler Algier. The running back is pretty special.
It's a really good one.
Tanner Mordecai has been awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mordecai, Jake Hayner, Carson Strong. It's a very weird year in that a lot of the better quarterbacks in the sport, not only from a numbers and production standpoint, but also from a talent standpoint, are in the G5.
Okay. Any others that you would suggest out there?
Does Tom just hate the G5 so much that he just quit the show?
I think so.
Or his internet probably went out. I'm probably missing somebody. Tom, we thought you quit the show because G5.
Because you were just sick of Cincinnati. I'm out.
No, you know what happened? I was on the tab and I was opening another tab, except I forgot to switch off the StreamYard tab. So I switched tabs.
I've done that. It's right there.
No,
would it be Desmond Ritter? Would that be the winner? It probably would, right?
I think so. I mean, they're the team that's in,
what's
playoffs.
Western Kentucky's record? Because that would be your Robert Griffin winner. Would be Bailey Zapp.
They're not great. I don't know it off the top of my head, but they're like 4-3 or 4-4, something like that.
Yeah, they could still win the league, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're 4-4, but 3-1 in Conference USA.
It would just be we would need to get like Jake Haener and Carson Strong would be our G5 Heisman showdown. We always get the two quarterbacks going up against each other, get to put like Deshaun and Lamar side by side. Oh, what's going to happen out here? I wouldn't be opposed if there was a Group of Five trophy that we awarded to the most outstanding player, but I don't foresee it anytime in the near future.
Oh, right. Last kid on this, the Sky Moore for Western Michigan. 58 receptions, 763 yards, came back from injury. Like his October numbers were just absolutely insane.
Ford at Cincinnati. I don't know if he was mentioned.
Jerome Ford.
Yeah, he's got 14 touchdowns.
He needs to score more of them, man. Hey, style points are back. Cincinnati needs to stop messing around and being up 14-12 against Tulane and beating Navy by 7. We need Jerome Ford 4 touchdown performances the rest of the way so that we can start making this debate a little bit more interesting.
I mean, he wouldn't win because we know that freshmen never win the Group of Five Heisman, but Rasheen Ali at Marshall's got 15 touchdowns.
Is that is he a running back or a wide receiver? Because I know Grant Wells.
Running back.
Okay. Grant Wells was high on mine, just sort of higher on my list, but I wouldn't think that he's closer to some of the names that have already been mentioned. All right. This next question comes from a longtime listener, NM War Eagle. He's participated in a lot of mailbags over the years, and NM War Eagle is back. Been here since day one. It's got me through many years commuting for work and road trips out west. You make us feel like we're part of the gang. Love that Auburn isn't a part of Saturday night discussions. Is that because Bud doesn't want to eat crow? No, Bud, before you even answer, I can say that is just how hectic it can be on Saturday night, especially with some of those 7 p.m. games. And at the very end of the show, credit to Tom Fornelli, because before the final music was playing out, he said, shout out to Auburn for a very good win against Ole Miss. So we did not get a chance to sing the praises of the Tigers within the context of a very good SEC win, but we also have the Tigers coming up in the SEC on CBS Game of the Week against Texas A&M this coming Saturday, which you can watch on cbssports.com or through the CBS Sports app for free, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. So Auburn, NM War Eagle, you get your time right now. What did we think of the result? What did we think of the matchup coming up? And how do you judge this team that now we see, according to the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, is the 13th best team in the country?
I will eat some crow. Auburn is better than I thought they would be. Now, to this point, okay, they blew out Akron, who is terrible, Alabama State. My numbers show they were really not competitive with Penn State, like on a down-to-down basis, and they were lucky to lose by only 8. They come back. They have kind of a shaky win, I think we would argue, over Georgia State. LSU,
that was shaky. Yeah.
They should have lost.
LSU, we bet on. I bet on Auburn against LSU. Called it out. Said LSU was an absolute fraud, and if they had a tougher early schedule, Orgeron would have been out in September. And they cashed that ticket for me. They were not competitive in any way against Georgia, which a lot of teams are not. They go on the road and they beat Arkansas. I bet them in that one. Felt really good about it. Against Ole Miss, bet them as well. Really was kind of scared to do it because of all the suspension rumors early in the week. Wish it would have gone heavier on that. Ole Miss is very banged up, and I liked Auburn's secondary and their ability to win one-on-one balls and not just have the free runners against Ole Miss, which is kind of a team that is limping to the finish injury-wise. They've done a nice job against their schedule. I do think A&M will beat them this weekend. I think this is the first time they've played a good defensive line since Georgia. Their offensive line was not competitive against Georgia's defensive line. And I think A&M will beat them up front.
Yeah, that's really it to me. Because if you look at Bo Nix's last 2 games, he's been phenomenal. He's completed 43 of 56 passes. He's averaging about 10 yards per attempt. He's got 3 touchdowns. He's got 1 interception. It's just the last 2 games have been against Arkansas and Ole Miss. If you look at his stats before those 2 games, he was great against Akron, was bad against Alabama State, although didn't really play a whole lot. But you mentioned this defense. When he played against Penn State, he was very, not bad, but pretty mediocre. Against Georgia, he was mediocre. LSU, he was mediocre. Georgia State, he was bad, which just, I don't know.
And LSU's defense sucks too. Like we shouldn't lump LSU in with Georgia Penn State.
And then their final 4 games are against Texas A&M, good defense. Mississippi State, good defense. South Carolina, he'll put up numbers. Alabama, good defense. So I think that while they deserve credit for what they've done and Bo Nix is playing better, I'm still kind of a little more hesitant to be just completely jumping on board, seeing what they've got left to play.
To be fair, and Bud had a good idea last night because he tweeted out one of our text threads. He said that should be premium content for Cover 3 subscribers. I recall at some point early in the season, Bud texting the group chat and saying, guys, Auburn might be better than I thought, like might be good. And so I definitely give you credit for that. I think this game, I mean, clearly it's going to be hyped up, CBS game of the week, but I think there's a ton we're about to find out because A&M, since the Bama game, the schedule's been light against Missouri and South Carolina. And like, if you look at A&M before that game against Alabama, like they were a 19.5 underdog for a reason at home. Like, I just wonder what version of Texas A&M we're going to get. Like, they've been a lot better and they've gained a lot of confidence, but I still wonder if one of those clunkers is in there. The play I like in this game is probably the under. I'll give you a little early lean for the locks because do you trust Zach Calzada? He's been playing better. Do you trust Bo Nix on the road? I think this could be one of those SEC slugfests where both of the defensive lines are eating the other team's lunch.
You know what I'm hearing?
What?
This game, it's going to be a gut check Saturday.
Oh, gut check Saturday. Listen, I recorded a voiceover for a social video. I have no idea where it went, but if you see it, understand that I was laughing on the inside as I scripted. Zach Calzada has been playing some of his best football of the season against South Carolina and Missouri.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? You can only do like 60 or so seconds. So sometimes you got to get those like deep cut jokes, just like slide them on in there. But yeah, true. Zach Calzada has been playing some of his best football of the year against South Carolina and Missouri. We'll see what happens on a gut check Saturday, game that'll be decided at the line of scrimmage. All right, let's do one more real quick because I think we can knock it out fairly quickly. All right. This one is from DMS 6391. All right, we'll just call him DMS. Love the show. Fun balance between the gambling stuff and actual analysis and insight. Mailbag question. So here's the situation. The offense is up 1 late in a game. They score a touchdown to go up 7. Should they consider going for 2 to make it a 2-possession game? 9 points. In theory, I like the idea, but maybe it's not practical or the analytics disagree. Maybe it's something that works in a video game, but not as well in reality. Any insight on this? You are the team. You're up 1. You score a touchdown. You are now up 7 with an extra point try. Do you go for the 1 or the 2?
Go for 1. I understand the impact of making it a 2-score game, but if you kick the extra point, you're up 8. So it's still a 1-score game, but now your opponent has to not only score a touchdown, but then convert the 2-point conversion. And the numbers we've seen, I think it was 43% of 2-point conversions in college the last few years have been successful. So you're still asking an awful lot of your opponent with an 8-point lead. Obviously, yes, a 9-point lead, depending on how much time is left in the game, probably ends the game. So I understand the allure of going for it, but your odds of winning are still pretty good. And I think you have more to lose in that situation than you have to win.
Yeah. I think here you want to have variance on your side, and kicking the extra point is a near certainty, even in college. There's no guarantee the opponent actually drives down and scores a touchdown, right? So part of the analysis is you need to figure out what is the likelihood the opponent actually scores a touchdown, and what is the likelihood the opponent actually converts the 2-point conversion. There is a scenario here where if you are hanging on to a lead and you are like a major underdog, if your internal calculations are that like it is extremely likely the opponent goes down and scores a touchdown on you, like really, really likely, and your defense is that damn bad,
consider it strongly.
You may need to consider going for 2 because the only way you get a stop is basically the clock and the number of possessions being on your side. Because I think implied in the whole, they're definitely going to drive down and score a touchdown. If your defense sucks that bad, I think that their chance of getting an extra point is probably north of 50%, right? It may be more of like 70%-ish. And then you can begin to kind of think about your break evens there. But in a relatively even game, you should take the 8-point lead and force the opponent to not only score, but also get the heads on the coin flip. just to tie you.
Danny?
Agreed. I think if you polled every college football coach, 130 of them, 100% would say you kicked the extra point.
I don't know.
Go up 8.
The guys who coach at like New Mexico State should be voting for the 2-point conversion. But it's very much like dependent
Unless
on
you're
how
playing
good is
New
your
Mexico.
defense. Well, okay, that's fair.
Hey,
Like
momentum.
New Mexico State against Nevada, right? Carson
Then,
Strong.
yeah, go for 2.
I'm probably going for it. If I'm that big of an underdog, I need the variance to swing in my favor.
Also, the failed 2-point momentum is not real, but confidence is. A failed 2-point conversion that all of a sudden brings
Kills
this,
you. Mhm.
yeah, that all of a sudden brings the other sideline to life. It's like, oh, it's only 7. Let's go. Very, very different proposition than thinking we have to go all the way down there and also convert on that 2-point try.
Which has always been my argument against going for 2 early instead of late. Because if you don't get it, yeah, mathematically it increases your odds of winning, but spiritually and confidence wise, if you fail to get it, yes, you know what you have to do, but your team is deflated because they just worked a whole lot to get those points, and now they're leaving with a sour feeling in their mouth.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And nothing makes me happier than saying, yeah, mathematically it works, but spiritually, I don't know, man. That's going to really take the soul away from a sideline. And I agree.
Does, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There were a couple little tidbits in here, but no outright picks, because you have to come and get these locks if you want to get them. 11 a.m. on Thursday, we will be live at youtube.com/cover3. Subscribers of the podcast, wherever you get your podcast, you'll be getting it probably around like 12:45, 1 o'clock as soon as we get done taping and get it posted to the feed. So make sure that you check in for that. And with Saturday night, we're trying to hammer in like one set time, but the games are all over the place. So how do you make sure that you're ready for the instant reaction show? Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/cover3. Smash that bell notification so that you can find out when we go live and you can come and join in on the fun. You can follow him on Twitter at BudElliott3. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow him at Tom Fernelli. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.